Welcome to Backstage with Geoffrey Morrissey. I'm your host, Geoffrey Morrissey. Christmas has come early for this journalist. I am backstage at the Wilbur Theater. I'm joined by Dave Rawlings and Gillian Welch. Dave and Gillian, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, good to be here.
And so it seems like to me, we were talking a little bit about this, I've been to Newport Folk for the past 2 years. I've always been a fan of sort of a folk and Americana music, but it really seems to be having its spotlight right now in the mainstream. So why do you think that this genre is really resonating now? Is it something about the time? Is it something about the talent that's in 2017? Or
I think it's a combination of all those things, and also just I think with this kind of acoustic music or music that has a traditional bass, you kind of, the further pop music moves from it, sort of the more space that it creates for people who like that kind of music, they find their way back, and as it moves closer to the mainstream, you just sort of see that ebb and flow as time goes.
Yeah, and it's possible that it's easier to find now than it was before.
I mean, I think that part of what's happened also is, when early on in our career, kind of when Oh Brother, that Where Art Thou sort of happened, that, turned a lot of kids on to acoustic music and this kind of Americana sound. And then people like, I don't know, maybe the kids in Mumford & Sons or Old Crow Medicine Show or bands like that, were kind of started out there. And then a lot of people have heard them, and it's viral. It just expands as generations go on.
I also think there might be a little bit of like lifestyle frontierism going on. You know what I mean? Where people are looking around them and thinking, well, no one's going to tell me how to live. Like, what do I want to do? Maybe I want to be a spoon carver,
Yeah.
I feel like people are really looking around them and making choices, for how they want to live and what they want to do and what they want to listen to.
Right, and story songs, that are sort of the heart of this kind of music, just, these stories have been around for, in some cases, hundreds of years, and they're not going away.
Well, that almost has to be daunting when you're entering a tradition that is hundreds upon hundreds of years old, and trying to stay true to the original, but then put your own spin on it too.
I think you just have to love the music, and then you just do it because you're not really, I don't think, when we started out writing songs and singing them, we didn't have any options. It wasn't like we were going to do this. We had tons of other things we were thinking about. It's like, this is all we did. And if people happen to like your take on it, or the songs you write, the music you play, then you're lucky enough to be able to make a career out of it.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I sing, people always tell me I just sort of sound sad when I sing, and that wasn't really a choice,
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
not choosing to sing this way. This is just kind of how I sound.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, and it's interesting now because when you guys were sort of on the frontier of that, and now you guys have a scene surrounding you. So how has that sort of affected things now that there's just so more, I guess, people than when in the late 90s?
Well, it's just a little less lonely out there on the road.
Less lonesome.
And you hear a lot of music that you love and that where people are coming from, which is fun. I mean, I guess it's validating in a way to know that other people hear this, hear beauty in the same art that you do.
I know, speaking for myself, but I'm sure this is true of David as well. It's we were talking before we started rolling the tape here that like you just went to that Courtney Barnett show, and she's in her encore, she's playing one of our songs. She's playing Elvis Presley Blues, and that's one of the nicest things that happened. We write these songs, and I never really think anyone else is going to sing them. You can't really predict what's going to resonate with people, and it's just been so great. It's always a complete honor and pleasure whenever we hear other artists that we love doing our stuff.
Yeah, with someone like Courtney, who I kind of discovered just looking around at new music, a few years ago. And, it's always a wonderful thing when you hear music that you respond to. And then when we happened to meet her at Newport Folk Festival, she was aware of our music and a fan also. And when that's reciprocated, even though I don't think you would necessarily put our records right next to each other and draw a quick line, but most artists have kind of a wider musical taste than, in some cases, audiences do.
Yeah.
So, you know, so it's, I don't know, that kind of thing's always a thrill to know that you're, you know, when you, to feel that when you love someone's art, that they like yours, and, you know.
Well, then I love it when we hear someone doing one of our tunes and they bring something to it that I didn't know was in it or didn't expect. I guess I'm saying I love to be surprised by, you know, people's versions of our tunes.
And all music is connected because it's such a different variety of artists that are covering your songs. And we were just talking about Elvis Presley Blues for a minute, but there are just so many songs that stood out to me on this record. Poor David's Almanac, Midnight Train, Lindsey Button. How do you both sort of lend your voice to someone, or I guess how do you try to humanize someone that you might not necessarily know? Because not meeting Elvis Presley and taking someone and boiling that down to such a human portrayal of him, or something like Lindsey Button where I may never meet her, but I feel like I know her life story and I can empathize with her. So how do you guys insert yourselves into characters?
I think there's always, you have to have some key thought that drives the song. I mean, with Elvis Presley Blues, it started with a thought about how Elvis, unlike John Henry, who we mentioned in the song, Elvis kind of had to change the world of music, but then sort of live into his obsolescence. You know, he kind of became obsolete while after doing something that almost unimaginable to any of us, to like be one person who had that big of an effect on art. And I think that was kind of the key thought to that song. And
then kind of in some way combined with, I remember hearing years ago that when Elvis made his television debut, that velvet shirt he was wearing, his mother had sewn that shirt for him. And then somehow combining with that sort of aspect of his person, or just some factual detail about him, that was kind of the underpinning for telling the story.
yeah, and then you just, you know, in some ways, it's what you don't put in that lets people add their own thoughts to it or see how it connects to their life. I mean, you need to leave some space in a song. When you're talking about the song Lindsey Button, you know, you don't know a whole lot about her, but you feel like you know enough to that she feels like she exists.
It comes to life.
Yes, and I think that's the most kind of important thing to realize as a writer. And also when I look at old traditional story songs or story songs that other people wrote, and I see how much is in there, it's just, you know, it's something I guess you have to do as a writer, is try to figure out which of those little nuggets are gonna bring a story to life in someone's mind.
How did you navigate that process? Because I imagine it takes a lot of practice and work to be able to write something that's just revealing enough.
I think you have to be able to write some stuff, and then either with the help of other people when you sing it for them, or just by distancing yourself, you have to listen to it with fresh ears and say, how would I feel if I heard this coming out of a radio and I'd never heard this song? Like, what would I be thinking at this moment? And if you need to make a change, go ahead and be brave and do it.
Yeah, you have to be brave enough to throw out some decent writing if it tells too much, you know. Like, I know movie editors say sometimes really good acting ends up on the cutting room floor because it doesn't serve the larger film. And that's how it is with a song, too. We might write a couple verses that tell you other stuff about Lindsey Button, but it might not make the song better. So you got to just give it the axe.
Yeah, I can imagine that that's very difficult, too.
It can be hard, but we sometimes liken it to, you know, these folk songs that we love and are very much kind of informing this record, Poor David's Almanac. They've been boiled down over the years to the great verses, you know, the old folk songs.
Like in some cases, these songs would have had so many more verses when they were written, or many people have, you know, sung them and added a verse or two of their own, and only the most, you know, essential ones kind of tend to get passed down.
In the collective, memory bank, only the really good stuff hangs around. And so we try to somehow bring that aesthetic into our songwriting. Not worry about linear stuff, not worry about giving you all the progressions of the stories, but just giving you what you need.
Yeah. And I was reading something really interesting with Poor David's Almanac, that all of these songs followed a similar path in their creation. So take me on that path. What was that, I guess, similarity? And then you also mentioned that wasn't too usual.
Yeah, I mean, all of them started with some little piece of melody or a phrase or something that kind of previously existed. Maybe it was just a little bit of a melody I saw written down in a music book, and I thought, that has an interesting shape. Let me try to manipulate that. Or a phrase like something like "money is the meat in the coconut," that I thought, well, that's interesting. I'd like to sing that and try to make a song out of it. And even the one that's kind of the most of an outlier was a song called Airplane that's on the record. And Airplane, when that was something that we had written a long time ago, and that a little bit of that chorus existed, and it always stuck in my mind. So they started there, and then we moved forward with this real desire to keep them as small as possible, to make them just feel, just only have an essential melody, like not really write a bridge or not really depart anyway from the central thought, and just to try to keep them, as focused as they could, like great folk songs that we love.
I think, I was hoping they would feel familiar upon first listening, in that way that folk songs feel inevitable, like, oh, well, of course it goes this way. It had to go this way. So, we were going for that.
And mission accomplished.
Good.
And then, so this is your first record, David, where it was your name on it. It wasn't in Machine. It wasn't a sort of a collaboration in name, at least. Right. Does being the front man come natural to you? Sort of being the one who has his name on the title, or being the main person on the stage?
I don't think it was... I think it's something that I hopefully have grown into over time, just from, the love of music and wanting to play, certain kinds of music that I guess we could only do when I was singing lead. I love when we play, when Gillian is sort of singing the song and I get to play guitar and play harmony. In some ways, I've done more of that in my life, so that's a very, very comfortable role for me. And maybe this one's a little less comfortable, but there's reward in it too, because the music's a little different. And so I think, anytime you can play some music, and it doesn't matter what your role is, as long as you're fulfilled when you're doing it. Like, I've had times on stage where, a friend of mine used to play blues guitar, and I would go out and there was this one kind of little rhythm guitar I could chunk along on, and it added to the show and it made things fun, and it was the simplest role in the world, but still at the end of the night, I had a smile on my face. And I think that's kind of the most important thing when you're trying to make music that entertains people and, that makes you happy, is that you look for something that has that.
Yeah.
And then sort of the flip side to that, too, is you're both sort of noted collaborators, both with each other. And then I know, Dave, you've done stuff with Ryan Adams, Old Crow Medicine Show. So how do you support each other creatively? How do you guys sort of create, I guess, conditions to be able to work well together and to be able to, I guess, support each other's ideas?
Our tastes are very, very aligned. It's a really hard thing to try to be working with someone and to say, I think this is better, and they say, no, I don't think it's better. So it's that doesn't really happen with us that much in the end. Stuff will move back and forth in the course of writing, but in the end, we're very like-minded. And I think that's kind of how we started working together.
Yeah, and I think the most valuable thing you can have in a collaborative relationship is the ability to take advantage of the perspective that someone else has. You know, sometimes the most striking thing in a melody or a line or a song that you might be working on might be something that just came so naturally to you that you don't value it. Mm-hmm. And I mean, sometimes people can see the flaws in it that you can't see, but sometimes people can see the gold in it that you can't see. And that's, I mean, that's the most important thing. I mean, I think about a song I wrote with Ryan Adams that's on the first record that I made called A Friend of a Friend, the song To Be Young, which is the, I guess, second track on Heartbreaker after the whole conversation thing. And you know, Ryan and I kind of banged that out, a lot of it at a party when we were, you know, I don't know, it wasn't really about writing songs. I mean, it was just having fun and playing music. And I don't think, he never would have thought of it again, you know? It was just something that happened. And I remembered it. And the next morning I thought, boy, that was a cool thing. We should try to finish that song. And eventually I got in touch with him and was like, hey, we should finish that. He's like, what song? And then we went, but you know, it's one of those things. I mean, that's good collaboration because on some level I thought that was a really cool thing. And and maybe the parts of it that he was spitting out were just so natural to him that he wasn't even thinking about it. You know?
Well, and sometimes too, when we would be arranging tunes, like even for our first record, Dave would, in a very early arranging session, play some lick, and then he wouldn't play it anymore. And I'd say, "Wait, where's the lick?" Yeah. And he's like, "Oh, that was kind of a stupid lick." I'm like, "No, but that was a good stupid lick." You know, the kind that gets stuck in your brain and you can't get out.
Well, I could do this for hours, but I won't subject you both to that, so I'll make this my last question. Who are y'all listening to right now? Who has your ear?
Well, I've got that new Courtney Barnett and Kurt Weill record. I was given that for my birthday. So that's actually waiting at home when we get off the road.
Yeah, the new Lucas Nelson record is cool. He's got some good songs. It's and he was out supporting Neil Young. You know, I mean, playing in the band, and now he's got a record.
We mostly listen to dead people, so
same. Yeah, exactly.
So, and thus the panic when people say, "Who are you listening to? Who's alive?"
Yeah, exactly. Who's alive? It narrows it down. I'm certainly listening to Poor David's Almanac and the entire catalog of both Gillian and Dave. They've been my guests today. Thank you both so much.
Thanks, Jeff.